Get this meeting started. Call the joint meeting to order of Deposit and Hancock Boards of Education. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Get started. We call the meeting to order, joint board meeting of Hancock and Deposit. Both of our boards are here. If everybody could stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance. At this time, I'll turn the meeting over to DCMO Superintendent Mike Rullo and Dr. Rebecca Stone from BT-BOCES for the presentation.
Check. Thank you. Perfect. Excellent. Thank you, Cliff. Good evening, everyone. As Cliff mentioned, my name is Mike Rullo. I'm the district superintendent from DCMO BOCES. Thought we'd just give you a brief overview of the agenda for this evening. And so we will start with some introductions in just a moment of the boards of education and our project team. Then we'll do a presentation, an overview on merger, which will be some review information and some new information that should be helpful for this evening's conversation. We will do some Q&A after that presentation, and that will set the stage for a review of the information from the feasibility study, which will also be followed by a Q&A. And so with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Rebecca Stone, who will do some introductions.
Okay, as we move to the next slide, we are going to go through and we're going to introduce all the players for tonight. Well, at least for the first half. Lori Asquith, who is our superintendent for the Hancock, stand up please, Central School District. Thank you. We have Denise Cook, the superintendent of Deposit Central School District. And the Hancock Board of Education, we have the president, Cliff Johnston. Thank you. The Vice President, Christopher Gear, Nick Hazen, Vicki Bogart, and Dr. Michael McDonald. Thank you. The Board of Education for Deposit, President Dean Price, Vice President John Lanner, Dawn Faulkner, Julie Martin, and Stacy Axtell. Thank you. Also with us tonight, we have David Elliott, who is the Coordinator of Educational Aid Services at the Office of Educational Management, and Maureen Dario, the Associate in School and Business Management in the Office of Educational Management. That is the first part of tonight, and then we'll go forward with the second part after we do this section. Thank you. David's going to start us off.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out. My name is David Elliott. I am the Coordinator of Educational Aid Services at the New York State Education Department. I oversee the Office of Educational Management Services. That program office contains many different areas that you may be familiar with. So that would be the BOCES operations and finance. So any service the BOCES offers, my office has to approve it. I also oversee pupil transportation. So school busing across the state, that's something that I oversee in my office, as well as contracts for excellence and the Smart Schools Bond Act. In addition to those, my office also oversees school district organization and reorganization and school governance. That is why I'm here tonight. What you have all been a part of up to now is a very difficult process. You are exploring a permanent change to your two school districts that cannot be undone. A merger is not an easy task. It's not an easy thing to talk about. It's not easy to accomplish. But you all are here for the purpose of exploring the feasibility of the merger of the Deposit and Hancock school districts. In general, overall, the education department does not have an opinion on this. We do not have a horse in the race. School districts in New York State are locally controlled. Nothing will occur unless you all authorize that to happen. Keep that in mind, right? There is a group of consultants that spent months looking into the data, the operational aspects of the school districts. And I will tell you this, every single combination looks good on paper, right? It always looks good on paper. But what's important is that you all believe in the reorganization of these two school districts in order for that to be successful. That means you have to make your voice heard. You get to vote on this. It's not something that will happen automatically. It's a lot of work, but it represents an opportunity to reflect upon the rapid decline of enrollment across the state, not only here, over the last 50 years or so. Costs continue to rise. The legislature and the governor have dangled a carrot to every single school district and said, if you merge, you get all this extra money. Again, it always looks good on paper, but the choice ultimately is up to you. If you do decide to go through with the merger, the state is here to offer our support and guidance before and during and after. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mike Rullo. Thank you.
Thank you, David. We're really fortunate to have David and Maureen here tonight. And so thank you for making the trip down from Albany to be a part of this process and to help folks. I want to thank all of you for being here too. I know I said that at the beginning, but genuinely, to David's point, it's really important that people are engaged and informed. And so thank you on a beautiful night for taking the time to be here. Similarly, I want to thank your boards of education, your superintendents. I'm pretty sure they have a plenty of work to do, like with a normal school calendar. And so to add this to an already full agenda is a pretty significant undertaking. And so I genuinely appreciate, I know the work of schools, especially right now, right? Just getting through a budget season. It's significant. And at least from my perspective, and I think I can comfortably say this on behalf of Dr. Stone, we just genuinely appreciate the extra effort, attention, the meetings that you all extended, given the roles. And probably when you ran for school board, this wasn't necessarily on the list of to-dos and something that you signed up for. But you put yourselves out there as individuals and as a collective. And so thank you very much for the work that you've done. And again, Denise and Lori, I know the job of superintendent. I don't know the job of superintendent in Deposit in Hancock, but in general know the role. And just thank you for all the additional effort and care that you've given throughout this process. So I'm going to run through a few slides very, very quickly. These should look familiar because I think this would be the third time, at least the third time I've been present for this particular slide. But I think that it's important to just reset a little bit because this has been a process of actually well over a year from when we had that very first conversation in this auditorium. So I think that there's some important information here about what school district reorganization is. David talked about this just a little bit, but your districts would in fact be creating a new school district where two currently exist. And you can read there that reorganization forms a single larger school district. And we're looking at a merger in this particular case. Why do that? Well, there's a variety of reasons. Here are some of them, and we'll talk about some of the benefits as well. Excuse me, allergies this time of the year. I'm sure that many of you feel that same thing, right? And don't want to belabor the point, but you can see much of what David hinted at in terms of enrollments and budgets and the like. can be supported by school district reorganization. And notice that there are not fixed lines currently, this is very much allowable in a process supported by the NICED. Again, why reorganize? Sticking with that theme, here are some of the benefits. And if you participated in some of the groups throughout the process, you know that this was much of the conversation. You're looking at the potential for a larger student and tax base, some reorganization incentive operating aid, and you'll hear about some of those things tonight when our consultants provide some information on the study. Could lead to more resources, more educational programs for students, more support services, just more opportunities in general, which I think we'd all agree is absolutely important and critical for our students in this world today. Also, there's an opportunity for some reorganization incentive building aid. That's different than the general operating aid. And I know that Kathy Blackman will talk about that, but also that incentive building aid that is enhanced for a merged district. And I know that David has confirmed that number for the districts as well, which in essence is the maximum that would be allowable, which is an outstanding opportunity. There are several different types of reorganization. The consideration for your two districts is centralization. So that is a new school district created that includes the entire area of both current districts. And the districts have to have share a boundary line, and of course, your districts do. So as I said, it was a little over a year ago that we met in this auditorium to have a conversation with the boards to kick the process off. That was in March of 2025. In August of 2025, both boards voted to undergo a feasibility study and engage the services of the consultants who led this study. And then that work happened since the beginning of this calendar year. And that's the Leadership Solutions Advisors, LLC, who conducted the feasibility study. And as I said, you'll hear more from them this evening. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. So, I think you're next,
Yep.
Rebecca.
So that brings us to where we are today. So what you're going to hear today is a feasibility study that has been done that is going to give you a lot of information. The information is directed to the community, but it's also directed to the board. And what your next step as a board is to decide if you're going to vote yes or if you're going to vote no to move forward. So all the things that we're going to talk about next are procedural. So if you vote yes, first of all, it has to be a majority vote, a simple majority vote. If you vote yes, what you're doing is you're voting to move forward to allow the community to have a voice if they want to have a merger or not. If you vote no, then everything ends right here, right now, for a year and a day. A year and a day, it can come back up again, but if you vote no, then we're pretty much done for this portion of the merger study. If there is a yes vote, can you move one more for me, Mike? Thanks. If there is a yes vote, then what Mr. Rullo and I do is we write a joint letter to the commissioner and we let her know that the deposit and the Hancock boards have voted to move forward with the study, and that will start the process. So in the process, while this is happening, before you hit your first statutory vote, it is the job of the districts to make sure that they go out into the community and they make sure that the community understands the study. And in the meantime, one of the things that, so there'll be meeting dates and times. Can you go forward one more for me? And before, this will be David in just a second. And then what she'll do is she'll order David Elliott and his No. This is still me. Ah, this is still me. I'm telling you what, there are so many steps in this thing. All right, so what we will do, or what will happen is there will be a straw vote. The straw vote's going to go the same way that you would do any vote. You would have a straw vote in both locations. The straw vote is a majority vote. It is not legally binding. So whatever happens in that vote, if the vote is a no vote, then it stops. If the vote is a yes vote, then that's when it goes to the Commissioner of Education. I skipped a step. We write a letter to the Commissioner of Education, and she is going to order a statutory process in which we move forward with the merger process. The second piece that happens is that when we formally report that the straw vote is called for, the other piece that the Commissioner of Education does is she also will assess which BOCES a merged district would go to. And that is done at the state level. What they do is they'll do a study to see which district or which BOCES would be impacted, how you would be impacted, and then that would move forward to the legal or statutory petition, which is David Elliott. I'm going to steal that microphone back.
Check. Okay. Hello. All right. So after the straw vote, which, as Dr. Stone mentioned, is not legally binding, what the straw vote is a assessment of public support. The Commissioner of Education will not issue a centralization order unless there is sufficient evidence that there is support to reorganize in all the communities that are impacted, right? So your voice, again, has to be heard before the order will be issued, right? If the straw vote is in favor and in support of a reorganization, at that point, the commissioner will issue a centralization order. The centralization order will order the dissolution of the two school districts and create a new school district in the area that was occupied by the Deposit and Hancock school districts. The centralization order is not final until another vote happens. Lots of voting with this. All right. The centralization order is not does not finalize until another vote occurs in both school districts, and that vote needs to be ordered by a petition. There has to be a certain number of signatures on the petition. The law says it is 100 or 10% of the current enrollment, whichever's less, right? So we have the enrollment counts here on the screen. There would need to be 46 people in Deposit who are calling to have the statutory vote, and 29 in Hancock who would call to have the statutory vote. If that petition never materializes, there is no vote, there is no merger, right? Let's say it does happen though. There is enough people who sign it and say, yes, I want this to go to a vote. Once that happens, the commissioner orders a vote. At that time, my colleague and I will come down and we will oversee that in both districts. That vote occurs the same date, the same time in both school districts, because we can't have the outcome of one influencing the outcome of the other, right? On that ballot, on that vote, there are 3 questions asked. Those questions are, do we merge? Then, if yes, how many board members? And then how many years do they serve? 3 questions. If question 1 is defeated in 1 or more, it's done. It's a dead issue, right? The question cannot be asked again for a year and a day. But the other 2 props aren't even counted. It doesn't matter, okay? If it is in favor, you then have to elect a new school board, a brand new school board, right? Nobody is guaranteed a seat on the new board just because you were on a board of the previous district. You have to nominate just like you would, and you have to elect just like you would. That vote generally occurs within the next month or so after the merger vote. School board members can come from anywhere in the entirety of the community, right? That means that there is the possibility of a lopsided, depending on where you live, but the reality is you're all now in one school district. So you all represent everybody, right? That's what this, I mean, you have the opportunity to rebuild a whole new district from nothing. Additionally, a complication here is that there are 2 libraries that serve the Hancock and Deposit communities. The Deposit Library is an association library. The Hancock Library is a school district library. However, both libraries are designated to serve the boundaries of the school districts in which they exist. Once those, if those borders no longer exist, there needs to be a reestablishment of those 2 libraries. We've done a lot of work in the background here, and we've determined that there can be 2 overlapping library districts that serve the same area. So it appears at this point they would be proposing, but that would be on the same ballot if you decide to merge the ballot that you elect the school board on. After the new board is determined, they take their seats as quickly as possible because there's a lot of work from that point on, right? It's this I'll keep saying it, not easy, right? There's a lot that goes on in the background. All of the assets, all of the liabilities, all of the property, all the contracts, all of that needs to be taken care of in the background while the 2 school districts continue operating to close out the end of their year before the brand new district can begin. It's a lot of work. And then in May, the May prior to the new school district operating, you vote on the budget just like you would in May for the school district, the new unified school district, and for the libraries. And then the new district begins operating July 1 of that year. All right, and this is where we kind of put some stuff up timeline-wise. We've kind of already been through this, but this is how it looks on the screen here. We're at the June 26th point. I'm going to ask if there's any questions from anybody in the room. Now's a good time to ask. Yes.
Possibility too, that would just push everything back a year if that passed.
Absolutely. So if you couldn't hear the question, if the boards decide not to move ahead tonight, yes, there is nothing in law that says that you have to move ahead, right? We are not at that point yet. The statutory process does not begin until after the straw vote if it is in favor. There is still plenty of time to talk about this. As I said, this is not done without your support. Your opinion matters. Yes, in the back. I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Required or let go?
That's not up to the state. I can't answer that question. That is the new school board would determine what levels of staffing are necessary. Generally speaking, I can tell you that every time this has been discussed in my presence in any organization conversation that I've had, not just here but elsewhere, there is always the ultimate goal is to keep everybody employed. Right? There is significant amounts of extra money, operating money, that gets appended to the new school district on top of the aid that would already be received by the formulaic aids. Right? So using that and with some natural attrition, the staffing levels tend to balance themselves out.
David, can I just circle back to the first question? I just want to make sure that everybody's clear. If the boards separately don't make a decision tonight to move forward to a straw vote, that doesn't mean that they have to wait a year for that. The boards could make the decision next week, next month, 2 months, 6 months, right? They can make a decision at any point in time. Once each board separately makes a decision, well, kind of collectively separately makes a decision to move forward, then the straw vote happens and all these things kick in, as David's alluded to.
So the straw vote is not in law. It is a procedural hurdle that the department requires in order for the statutory process to begin. We expect that the straw vote will look like every other time you have voted in your school district. So if it's the May vote or a capital project vote that happens off cycle, anything like that. So, you know, the standard advertising time, we encourage the largest amount of turnout possible. So if generally speaking, school districts will advertise for 45 days, we want the minimum of the 45 days, right? That vote will look like every other vote that you've been a part of, but it won't be legally binding, right? But it is necessary.
If they wait for like 6 months, does that put the timeline back 6 months? Like
Yes,
when they're going to
that's
open
an
the
easy
school
question. Yes,
district?
absolutely. The timeline here is based on acting now or sooner rather than later. But as we've all said, there's nothing that is holding us to this at this point. The statutory timeline is there are steps that have to occur in a certain amount of time in law. None of this is in law. This is all procedural prior to the statutory process.
Is in law. Sorry. Whew, came on. When you say none of this is in law, so the first one, which is the board's resolve to continue the process, is not in law.
Correct.
And the straw vote is not in law. But once the straw vote goes to the commissioner and the commissioner authorizes it, everything from October down, and you can change the months, that's not a problem, but it's still timed after that point. There's 30 days, right?
Right.
Yeah, so that is timed. But anything above that, there's still time to do what you need to do.
Right. Anything up to and including the straw vote is not in law. Everything after that is in law and has a set time frame. You mean you want to vote in November of 26 and have the district begin July 1, 28?
To give the boards time to figure out what the new district's going to look like. That's not a possibility.
That's not a possibility.
That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not a possibility. That's not
It's not likely to be authorized by the commissioner. But I don't want to say that it's entirely impossible because the commissioner sets the operating date. So there would be discussion if there was a compelling reason to allow a year and a half. We'd like to hear it, but it's not likely. That's not happened in my my knowledge. To my knowledge, that has not happened.
But if the vote wasn't until January, let's say, would they be expected to start new school July 1?
Not necessarily.
Okay. Second question. So if we went to the straw vote and the straw vote says no, or that there's no public support, does that year and 1 day still apply? They could come up again at the straw vote, or we have to start the board process over?
The year and a day applies to the statutory vote, not to the straw vote. The straw vote, if it's defeated, that can happen again sooner than a year and a day.
I misspoke. I apologize.
I just want to show what's on the next slide from a timeline perspective. So hopefully this is kind of cemented in your mind, although it's a little squishy, right? But notice that these are the next pieces that we've talked about and saw them on some other slides, but just as a continuation. Just again, you can see that in May 2027, that new district budget would be voted on by the voters. Right, so you have to back some things up, give the new board time to do budget development, all of those types of things that are part of a typical budget process. So there's a little bit of squishiness to the dates, not a ton.
I think the other piece to note is as you go through the process, there is a lot of voting that goes on. So voters actually come out 4 different times. So that's important to note. You're going to say, oh my gosh, another one? Yes, there's another one. Just expect they're going to be there.
And the timeline up until the statutory process, if you want to look at it this way, it's kind of like a marathon, right? You don't sprint in the beginning, but the end of this, because of the way the laws are written, it feels like a sprint at the end. Yes. That's correct. There's not a way.
So
The law doesn't allow that. I'm sorry.
Can you repeat the
Oh,
question?
the
so
question
that-
was,
yeah.
is there a way to order that the board is consisted of an equal number or as close to an equal number, because it's an odd number of members on the board, from each of the school districts? And the answer, unfortunately, is no. That is not permitted in education law. It's, if you are the board member, you can you reside in the district, right? It's not an area of. So, I'm sorry to say. Yes.
No. How much of the feasibility study has the boards reviewed so far?
Has the board reviewed, you said?
Yeah, when it's come back from New York State, how much have they seen? Have they
I
digested?
don't know.
Or is this the first
That's a really good
part
question.
we're seeing it tonight?
So they did have it ahead of time, but not a lot of time. So that's a decision that they need to make, is if they've had enough time to digest it. If they haven't, they have time to do so. So this part isn't timed. We'll make sure, or they can make sure that they feel ready to be able to vote. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you.
And just to be clear, the state has to look at these to make sure that there isn't any assumptions in the study that aren't backed up by law or regulation or practice. We are not, we don't put our thumb on this at all. This is not our project.
Have we confirmed for sure that the Hancock Library would still be eligible to go into this library vote? It is my understanding that it was gifted to the Hancock Central District, and that if that district does not exist anymore, it would no longer be the property of ours. So I'm not sure about that last little line either. Do we know for sure that that would be possible?
Oh yeah, we've been working on this with our Office of Counsel, with the state librarian, as well as the boards and the attorneys of the two libraries. Everything that we presented here is a fact. All confirmed.
Dean over here.
Are you suggesting that the boards will vote tonight?
I'm not suggesting anything. It's up to the boards.
Are either boards anticipating voting tonight? Yes or no?
They haven't heard the study that's being presented, so I think that's a good question, but let's wait and see what the study shows. I mean, I know they've read it, but they'll have the opportunity to ask questions. And then after that, it'll be up to the boards.
When will the study be released to the public?
Should be released tonight. Pardon me?
In its entirety?
Yes, ma'am. No mic needed.
Any other questions before we move on to the presentation of the study?
So while Dean's trucking up to the back, we'll answer any other questions that you have, but then we'll do the study, and then it'll be open to questions again. So if you think of something that we haven't answered or you're curious about, there'll be another opportunity as well.
I just wonder, with our existing contracts, we get new contracts negotiated when there is a new board? Or do we continue with the remainder of our contract and then renegotiate?
It's a good question.
Do you mean collective bargaining agreements with?
Yes.
I'm not sure what contracts, because there's lots of different contracts, right?
Yes.
I'm going to hand the mic over to one of the consultants.
The existing collective bargaining agreements stay in place until a successor is negotiated by the new board. That could take a considerable amount of time. So let's just presuppose that this goes forward and there is a new district. All of the employees of the current deposit school district will have their current contracts, and all of the current Hancock employees will live by their current contracts until a successor agreement for the new district is negotiated for the new employees. So in the meantime, everybody has their same benefits that exist in the current collective bargaining agreements.
And for those of you that don't know, that's Cosimo Tangorra. He's one of the study consultants.
All right. Any other questions before we hear about the study? All right. Then Cos will let you introduce your team. They'll go through the study, and then we'll open it back up to questions again. I'm so glad you did that.
Yeah.
Next. Not yet. but I am.
No. All right. So I'm Cosimo Tangorra. This is Jeff Ziegler and Kathy Blackman. We're members of the group that did the merger study. We'll get into introductions in a little bit. But we are, go ahead, Zig. So our clarifying purpose when we do these things are to come in as unbiased observers of what's happening in the school district. Each of us have been school district employees over the course of our career, and we come into these, well, first of all, we only do things now that we want to do, right? We're at that point in our careers. We come into districts with communities that are open-minded and that want to have open conversations about what the future could be for their students and their taxpayers. And I have to say that we've been here over the last several months. I met with the boards about a year ago. It's been an absolute pleasure to be in your school districts, to meet with your community members, your faculty, your staff, especially your students, to have conversations. Never once did any of us on our way to a meeting say to ourselves, we don't want to do that tonight. And we would come back in a heartbeat. It's just been an absolute pleasure to be surrounded by a group of people who are so passionate about their school districts, passionate about what they want to provide for their students. And it's just been a clear pleasure. And what we do is we want to help folks through our process. And our process is inclusive. We have processes that include thought exchanges so that we can get community voice. We meet with advisory groups. We'll talk about the advisory committee in a minute. Stakeholder groups, focus groups, so that we can get as many people's voices in this process as possible. It's an inclusive, not an exclusive process. Anyone who wanted to be part of this process over the past several months had the opportunity to do so. And we wanted to make sure that at every single step of the way, we had support from your boards of education and your superintendents to make this inclusive. And we use this advisory committee process. And the advisory committee helps us inform the work that we're going to do, because at the end of the day, the boards of education are the decision makers. And we try to help people find their North Star. So if you look at this matrix, some of you may or may not see a star in the mess of all of this. But there's one there. And where is it, Zeg? And there it is. And once you see it, it's really hard to unsee it. And that's what we tried to do in the months that we've spent in these two districts engaging with your stakeholders in your community to find that North Star. I'm not going to get into the, well, that's okay. I'm not going to get into the whole reorganization process, but I will say this. The boards met and decided to move forward with the study. We've conducted the study. We're going to present that study tonight. At the end of our presentation, it's up to the boards to decide what they're going to do next. So, we focus on three things when we engage in these studies. The educational experiences that exist currently, what's the current state in terms of educational experiences for students, and what do we want that future state to be? What is the current state of your organizational capacity? So in terms of teachers and administrators and bus drivers and food service folks that make it possible to provide those educational experiences. And then finally, we look at the long-term financial sustainability of those projects. So you'll hear us talk tonight a little bit more about the opportunities, insights, and challenges around the educational experiences the organizational capacity and the financial sustainability of your school districts and possibly your school district. Our approach to the way we do the study is pretty deliberate. Other organizations may do this differently, and we're glad that they do that, but that's not how we do it. We focus on educational experiences first, intentionally, and then organizational commitment, and then financial sustainability. We have a deliberate process that's transparent, that includes as many stakeholders as possible, and that is as responsive as we can possibly be. So this is what the report is going to look like. It'll be released soon. All of you will have the opportunity to digest it. We understand that we're presenting this for the first time tonight. We know that you haven't had a chance, or nor has the Board of Education had a chance to digest it. But there are many, many more meetings that can take place where the boards can digest this, have conversations, and you all can come back to many more board meetings and ask questions about the report after you've had the chance to digest that. But it's a pretty lengthy report. As you can see, it's 167 pages. And these are the first 3 pages of the report. And you can see by the table of contents, it's pretty intense. Scott Bischoping is a retired district superintendent for the Wayne Finger Lakes BOCES. He was, prior to that, he was the superintendent and principal of Livonia and a business teacher. He couldn't make it tonight. Actually, he called me on his way here having car trouble. I just don't think he wanted to come. But he's not able to make it tonight. I'm Cosimo Tangorra. I was superintendent of schools for many years in New York State, deputy commissioner of education, currently the chair of the Educational Conference Board. In the interest of full disclosure, I've been involved in a couple merger studies as a superintendent and did study school district reorganization as part of my dissertation. Jeff?
Hello? Test one. Am I on? Hi, I'm Jeff Ziegler. I am also a retired school superintendent. I retired in 2016, so I've been out for a while. I did 9 years worth of interim work in that process, and like Kaz, have been involved with mergers. I was actually involved with a BOCES merger when OCM BOCES took over Cortland Madison BOCES. And so, you know, it's like, I look at this, so kind of my whole experience with this has been through the educational process. And the focus, when we talk about deliberate, we talk about transparency, you know, we're always kind of looking why the educational piece is first is through, because of looking at it through the lens of the kids. What is going well in Hancock? What is going well in Deposit? What can ultimately go well if you merged? And even if you don't merge, where can things improve in both districts if this merger doesn't happen? So we kind of look at through this through a multiple lens. And I'll turn it to Kathy.
I think I have a mic. Yep, I do. Hi, Kathy Blackman. I'm a CPA, worked in public accounting for 10 years, ended up working for one of the districts I audited as a standalone school business official for 19 years. The district I was at did undergo a reorganization study while I was there. And so I do have personal experience with that as well. And then I ran the Broome-Tioga BOCES Central Business Office for the last 12 years, retired a couple years ago, and trying to be able to look at school districts' educational opportunities through a financial lens. So that, and you know, my goal is to provide long-range planning so that districts can sustain educational programs and do what's best for kids. I'm always last. They always put the finances last.
That's for last, Kathy. So we employ an advisory committee in our process, which is made up of stakeholders from both communities. a cross-section of both communities so that as many people as possible can be included. We had students and faculty members and community members, some administrators. We do that so that the product that we produce at the end of our process isn't what we think, because what we think doesn't matter. This is your community. These are your kids and your tax dollars. So we work with an advisory committee and stakeholder groups and focus groups, and we employ the thought exchanges so that we can hear from you and your communities about what is happening in the school districts. And all of the information that we provide to you in this report is based on what folks from your friends and your neighbors and your community members have told us, and what the data has been presents. So we run everything that we have through the advisory committee, not to say, hey, do you agree with this, but does it resonate? You know, this is what your students told us. Do you agree with that? Do you disagree with that? What's wrong about it? This is what the stakeholder groups told us. This is what the focus groups told us, so that we, before we put the product together, we run that through your community members. And just, you can just see all the folks who were involved in this throughout the time that we've been in the district. So this is our roadmap. So this roadmap maps out two processes. One is a process that we would normally use, and one is an expedited process, is what we used for the Hancock and deposit merger study. So we usually activate in month one. We did that in January of 26 this year. We asked a lot of your administrators to provide us with a great deal of information so that we could plow through it. Jeff and Kathy did the lion's share of that work in terms of the educational data and the financial data that happened. In month two, in February here, we continue that document review and then start to engage with the advisory committee. In month three, we start having conversations with those groups, talking to students, engaging the focus groups, engaging stakeholder groups, making sure we run that information and we have a cadence month by month with the advisory committee. In month four, we continue those conversations. In month five and month six, we get to the point where we have a draft report. In month seven, we present that to the state education department. David and Maureen have been great partners, but they don't necessarily love everything that we give them in the draft. They tell us, here are the things that need to be changed in order for the report to meet the standards of the state education department. And that is the report that we present to you tonight. Again, it's an analytical approach through these three lenses. We keep coming back to focus on these three steps because it's important. We don't start with what can we afford and move forward. We start with what's aspirational. What would the structures be? What were the necessary structures to put those aspirations in place? And then finally, what would the financial sustainability of those exist?
So we start off with educational experiences on purpose. Schools are about kids. Finances are important. Organization is important. But instruction, learning, all that is kid-focused. We believe these merger studies, and any study we do actually, no matter where we are, we always come back to looking at the learner and looking at the processes that the kids are involved with. So I spend months, weeks, plowing through what is present picture in Hancock, what is the present picture in deposit when it comes to the instructional program. And we look at course classes, course offerings. We even go back and do a historical look at what was once in your program guide as to what was once offered and may not be offered presently for any number of reasons. Not up to us to come up with why. It is, this is the information that we have. We then have conversations with kids. Like we spent days talking to students. What do you want? What do you like? What don't you like? If you had a choice, not about merger, but if you had a choice of what you would like to see in your program, what would it be? So we then take a lot of that information and we have that same conversation with the adults, because the adults, many people have had their experiences, and the experiences that you may have had as a student in this community, in either community, may not be the same experience that kids are having today. So we learn from that end of it also. And then we come up with what we call challenges, what we call insights, and what we call opportunities. So, and I'm not going to read all of these, but we kind of focused on certain things and areas that, you know, we think are important, what was reported to us as being important to each community, but yet there are challenges within each community on how that happens. And in some cases, when you think of looking at, you know, philosophical differences between middle school and junior high, right? You have differences in grade configurations between two school districts. You have buildings that go K5. You have buildings that go K4. That means you are 512 or 612. So there's a difference in how that program looks like. And that's a challenge, because there truly are philosophical differences in how you approach those learning environments. And if you're going to merge, that needs to be figured out. What is that approach going to be? The other challenge is you're talking about two programs that, although follow the same types of curriculum, but they're not using the same stuff. The approaches are different. There are philosophical differences in how Hancock approaches certain things, and there are philosophical differences in how Deposit does. But you're going to be, if you become one, that gap needs to be bridged, right? We need to come up with fundamental reading programs. We need to come up with how we're going to be delivering math instruction at the elementary level. We need to be able to do the same. And as we look at even building programs to what that portrait of a graduate looks like, both districts need a lot of work in beginning to move in that direction. So in some cases, neither is where they need to be, neither is ahead of the other, but there are programs that need definitely to be looked at and how we approach that. The other part to it is, one of the challenges, and most small school districts face this, is we always think about opportunities for kids. And the first time we talk about that, everybody talks about, oh, more college courses, more this, more that, more this. And I always come back to, what about the kids that aren't getting it? And in a lot of small school districts, the support level for those kids is really hard to deliver. We think that classes of 5, 6 kids meets that need, and it may not. So how do we, one of the challenges you have here is how do we best support all levels of learners? How do we best support our advanced kids? And how do we support our lower academic students? And I'm not talking special ed. There's a fair number of population in both school districts that are not special ed, and they may not be college, or they may not be doing APs. All right, so the question becomes, how do we begin to take a look at? Those are challenges, but on the other hand, some of these challenges lead to greater opportunities. Not all these challenges are insurmountable. In fact, most of what you're going to see, the challenges that you're going to see here, the opportunities and insights that we've come up with through our conversations with folks can lead you into a direction of how we can begin to meet some of those challenges. So the insights, there's a lot of similarities between you guys. There really is. We spent several days in both districts. We talked to staff, we talked to kids, we talked to custodians, we talked to bus drivers, we talked to everybody. And there's a lot of similarities, and one of the biggest similarities is the passion in each of your districts for each of your schools. That poses a problem when it comes to merger, because nobody wants to not be in existence still. On the other hand, we look at that as if it's an opportunity to enhance the programs for kids, what we once had that passion for, sometimes we have to think out of that because times are different today. We talked about that emerging provides expanding opportunities, both at the upper end and the lower end. The other piece about it is you have declining enrollment in both districts. We took a look at this merger, and we did a time, in the study, we'll talk about enrollment projections out. And your biggest enrollment would be the second year of your study, or the merger. That would be the biggest enrollment. Later on would be 750 or something, right in that category. And then progressively after that, your enrollment continues to drop again. If you were to stay separate, in some cases, enrollment drops so significantly, it's like, oh my goodness, like, what do we do in order to stay in existence? And how do we continue to provide those programs? We talk about, special ed. I had an interesting conversation with Mike, and as I talked to Lori and Denise about this, it's like kids travel a long ways for some lead services. And, we begin to think about, space and room and all that. And the opportunity is to take a look at, the insights are, how do we keep them in-house? How can we bring them back? How can we be in charge of that program? Not that BOCES and those folks are doing a bad job, but how can we bring them home so that they're not, some of our most challenged kids are on a bus for a long time going to a BOCES program. And that the merger could keep more special ed kids in the districts. So the opportunities, building special ed programs in-house. Both of your school districts offer that whole social emotional learning piece, but sometimes staffing becomes a problem in those areas. By merging larger student body, the capacity to be able to offer those programming certainly would exist on a greater scale. Expanding extracurricular, expanding academic offerings. Within the report, all of this is laid out. There are, I don't know, 60 pages of documents that talk about all of this. Charts, you know, who offers what? How many college level courses are being offered? Where are they being offered from? Deposit, Hancock. When it comes to special ed, who's going where? How many kids? You know, those types of programming. We've concluded that the opportunity exists for both school districts and both sets of kids to have an expanded opportunity. I know people are thinking, well, if I'm in Hancock, you know, we really don't do this, and Deposit does. Well, no, that is in some cases true, but in some cases not true. There are some pretty unique programs going on in Hancock that Deposit doesn't have. And what we're saying is, you know, let's figure this out. The communities are close. The kids are the kids. And the responsibility of the adults is to figure out how can we best provide the best academic program for the kids. We have some selfishness to it, and that's why we're here, because we don't. Like, I'm passionate about program, and I'm passionate about providing opportunities for kids. But I'm not going to tell you who's doing, you know, like, you do it better, or you need to work on this, or you need to work on that. What I'm saying is, we all need, this is a self-examination of how we can better do this in the end. New offerings for middle school, high school kids, more efficient use of staff. And I know that that sounds like, there was a question, how many people are going to get cut? You know, I heard it, and I think that's a fear. I think, but to be honest with you, if we talk about expanding program, like, everybody's working right now. You got full loads, right? So the opportunity, if we're talking about expanding program, maybe you don't need this 4 sections of that, but certainly the opportunity would be is we can expand those programs to provide more opportunities. We can expand academic services for those kids who need it, which may not be able to be happening right now because everybody's teaching a full academic load and there's no time to do those things. When I talk about the historical study about what was once in your course guide, you're going to see that. Like, these are the courses that you once offered. And these are the courses you're presently offering. And there's a big difference. And a big difference comes from, well, we can thank state ed for a lot of it, right? We changed the regs. There's more requirements. There are different ways things need to do. And as we begin to take a look at moving towards what the pathways look like, you know, that causes us to enrich everything. For those kids that are going beyond, for those kids that are going to work, for those kids that are going to stay in a service, like, it's just, it raises the bar across the board. In order to raise the bar across the board, you need people. You need people who are passionate about doing that, so that, and people who are passionate about bringing electives in, and those type of things are some of those educational opportunities. Can I stop here and just say our questions, or you want me to keep going? Go through it. All right. So I'm going to wing this one because this is really Scott's thing. So, organizational capacity. To me, when I look at this, I think about, like, buildings and transportation, and I know that basically the work that we've been doing is working through with transportation coordinators and your routing programs to be able to figure out what's busing going to look like. And that's a challenge. No question about that. Because when you take a look at the districts and you are in your own little area right now, and you then become one, what does transportation look like? What do start times look like? When do elementary school gets there? When does dismissal happen? And all of those things will need to be looked at. And there will need to be some agreement upon that, depending on what schools are where. Because that's part of this also. Where's school going to be, right? Where's it going to, what's the middle level going to look like and feel like? What is those grade levels? And what happens at the elementary levels? So there's a lot of decisions that need to happen around the organizational capacity. Facilities utilization, long-term facilities, sustainability, whose buildings are in what condition, what needs to be done in order to make some of these moves possible. And a lot of that's going to be in where Kathy's at, because she understands that whole financial piece. And my idea was hire people like Kathy, so I didn't have to do that. And the other part about it is in this one, it's a challenge. It's listed as a challenge here, but you're unique in the fact that you already are merged almost, 99% in athletics. So that is very unique in my eyes when it came to this merger study. Sometimes the athletic side of things is the hardest thing to convince people to merge for, right? They're a Hancock, what are they? Lumberjacks? Wildcats, right? You're the Hancock Wildcats, or you're the Deposit Lumberjacks, right? I had to mix, and now you're the Eagles, right? So there's already an identity between the two school districts with the kids. And it's an interesting comment, and Tragan is here, and young man was awesome, one of our committees. But we asked every kid a question. What are you? Are you a lumberjack? Are you a wildcat? And 99% of them said, we're Eagles. And I found that very interesting. So although it's a challenge to say, thinking about this from an identity perspective, the kids have already figured the identity perspective out. And that's a challenge here, but to me, that's a challenge that's kind of already been met. The insights, transportation and optimization, efficiencies of sharing resources. I think that we look at that and, everybody's got snowplows and everybody's got this and everybody's got that. And you replicate a lot of those programs. And although you're still going to have the same number of buildings, and the campus is going to be not any larger in some cases than where it is, but there's a lot of replication of resources along those lines. And I know that, for example, a small school district in the Adirondacks, and, we relied on utilizing some of the town resources, for what we couldn't do, and it's like trying to figure out how can we collectively meet some of these organizational needs, right? Plowing and all the things and all that. And the other thing here that I found interesting was it's addressing staffing shortages. This I think is something that we've come up with, and this is a conversation we've had with administrators, and it's hard to hire people. Hard to get people to come here. And that's not anybody's fault, right? But you're in a competition for teachers that's across the state. And the and you know, individually, you share staff, you share a business person, you share a special ed director. There are already multiple people that are shared between those between the two districts. Hancock sends kids to deposit for physics because we can't hire a physics teacher in Hancock because there's one section. And the way staffing and certifications are, you know, in some cases you can't hire that position. So I think that looking at this from an organizational capacity, you would have that opportunity, a greater opportunity to be able to bring certified folks in to be able to deliver some of the goods that are not being delivered now. The opportunities, optimize transportation. It keeps coming back to transportation, right? Goals would be, right, kids don't need to be on a bus for 2 hours. Like, that's not going to happen, right? That just would be unacceptable from our perspective also. You know, streamline leadership. Right now, you two beautiful superintendents, right? And when you merge into the district, there'll be one. You already share two central office people between two who operate utilizing two very different systems. If I'm supposed to be doing, if I'm the business person, I'm in Hancock today, I'm doing it through this program. And if I'm in deposit, I'm doing it through that program. And although special ed may be a little bit more streamlined, it's like we're also, in fact, juggling between two BOCES. So if you're the special ed director and you're in deposit, you're dealing with Broome. And if you're in Hancock, you're dealing with DCMO. And we're trying to figure out placements for kids. Like, that's nuts. That's crazy. Like, and I don't know how she does it. She does a great job. But, you know, thinking about it through that lens, like, that's a juggle. And ultimately, not that it's happened, but ultimately there could be time lags. And that's a problem, right? Because that's a problem for kids. You know, so we got to take a look at that. Faculty recruitment and retention, we've already talked about that. Increase instruction support roles, how we utilize aides and TAs, how that whole background, folks, of what makes things work for kids, you know, are utilized differently. And in some cases they don't exist. So it would be nice to be able to see some of those opportunities too. And expanded leadership roles. You know, we've talked about this. You know, I'm big on building administrators being instructional leaders. I promote it. I do a lot of staff development with it. But when you are the building administrator, like, you're juggling everything. Like, you're doing you're 12, and you're juggling from kids who are having meltdowns in first grade to I'll use ninth grade issues. Like, there definitely is a significant increase in needing of some attention. Like, that's very difficult. So one of the challenges you have is streamlining who does what, when, or where. Right? We always talk about, we want them to be the instructional leaders, but when there's no time to be the instructional leaders because they're too busy managing the building, then we wonder why maybe sometimes we're not where we would like to be from an academic perspective. Kath, financial piece.
Okay. I'm on? Can everybody hear me? Okay. Thank you. So challenges. Ooh, okay, came out loud. By far the largest challenge in reviewing all the information, which I did. I reviewed, 3 to 5 years of information from financial statements, which are audits, which are independent audits that occur every year, as well as the shared business official pulling a number of reports on how the budget performance has been, budget votes, and history of tax increases and so on. So one of the largest challenges that the districts are going to have is related to taxes. That is because, generally when we talk about school finances, and we're going to go over the composition of revenues and expenditures in a couple of slides, but most districts that I've worked with have a pretty consistent reliance on local property taxes and state aid. So in this case, in looking at the taxes, it's going to be a challenge because the tax rates differ between the two school districts. And we have some towns that have properties that, are both in Deposit and Hancock, and we have some towns that are exclusive of either Deposit or Hancock. And so it's a mathematical calculation, the taxes. So you combine those two tax levies, and it's going to create a disparity, which is going to be one of the biggest challenges that the district is going to face, the new board, as they approach trying to balance that tax equity across the new district. But that does come with, we've mentioned a couple of times the fact that the two districts do a lot of sharing, athletic programs, staffing programs, et cetera. And it comes with a significant amount of reorganization incentive operating aid if the districts choose to merge. And so you've been doing a lot of sharing and been fiscally prudent for many years. And this, if the districts or communities decide to move forward with a merged district, it would come with incentive. And that incentive was enhanced with the newest governor. In July of 2024, they revised the way that reorganization incentive operating aid is calculated, because they want districts to look at this, especially smaller districts that could take advantage of additional resources to enhance educational operations, educational experiences. So it does represent a challenge, though. That's why it's listed on this slide, because it comes with a constant amount for the first 5 years, and then it's decreased by 10% per year for each year thereafter. The final year of aid is received in year 14. In year 15, that aid that revenue source is eliminated. So boards have to be fiscally prudent to recognize that we can't just jump out of the gate, and it's a challenge to kind of resist the temptation to add a layer of recurring costs that might not be able to be sustained in the long term. So one of the things that we did as part of this study was we looked at long-range planning, and currently both of the districts do a great job of balancing their budgets on an annual basis. And that usually comes with adjustments to the expenditure side of their budgets. And that's still going to be the case if the districts decided to merge, because over time we need to recognize that source of revenue is going to be eliminated. We also, as someone mentioned, what's going to happen with teacher contracts, it's already been talked about, but negotiating those new collective bargaining agreements is going to be a challenge, because they both have different components within them that each of the employees covered under those contracts would like to retain. So that comes with a challenge to facilitate and have a cohesive staff. Also, the tax rates, I talked about taxes as the largest challenge, but as part of that challenge, we need to make sure that we are looking prudently to the future and not just taking a significant tax increase right out of the gate. So within the report, there's a lot of information related to the tax structure, what it is independently, and what it would look like in a merged district. And the new Board of Education will decide how to manage that tax equity across time, over the years. So looking at the tax levy limit is something that is talked about every year if you are involved in the budget process. And I'm going to say this probably on every slide, maximizing tax revenues by looking at that tax levy limit and going up to the tax levy limit. It's prescribed by New York State, by the Office of State Comptroller. It has variables within it so that if you vote on a capital project 3 years ago and then the financing just starts and you approve that capital project, we're now allowed to increase the taxes to the level that was communicated in that original vote. So there are components within it that guide what that tax levy limit is on an annual basis. So some insights. Definitely both districts have been very strategic in managing their fund balance, which you and I can refer to as savings, and the reserves, which is a portion of the savings that the district can retain. And so, strong financial positions in both districts. There are some differences, and those were highlighted in the stakeholder meeting and the, advisory committee meetings. And, we had to look backwards to be able to look forward. But each of the districts kind of approaches their budgeting process in kind of a 3-year cycle, looking at, what happened in our most recent audit and what's happening in our budget that exists today. And then what can we reliably project in the future budget that gets voted on while you're still in that middle implementation year. So, kudos to both districts for, maintaining a, strong financial position. As you heard in my colleagues' conversations, the districts are similar from a financial standpoint as well, meaning the factors that go into the calculation of state aid are very similar wealth, poverty, enrollment declines, and so on. And so when looking at, just the formulas that generate state aid, there are a lot of similarities between the districts. As mentioned already, the new district should maximize by going out at the tax levy limit. That's the second time I said it. There'll be one more time before I'm done. And as I call him Zig, Jeff mentioned, with the reorganization incentive operating aid also comes an enhanced building aid. And so for the existing debt, that is going to generate additional, building aid. And then for a period of 10 years after the merger, after the date of the merger, the districts will have a significantly enhanced building aid ratio. And so if there are any capital projects that can be done in that 10-year period, we definitely would support that. And as already mentioned, we're collaborating on so many things already between the districts. This is just a further collaboration with or without reorganization incentive operating aid. We continue to share things between the districts. From an opportunity perspective, as mentioned, third time, you guys can say it along with me, maximize the tax levy limit, maximize revenues, for that opportunity. There is significant support when we're looking at collective bargaining, that we can negotiate competitive salaries We did look at this. There are some differences between the districts as far as, salaries are concerned across all bargaining units. However, by, forcing the new district to have a new collective bargaining agreement, this may enhance our ability to attract and retain, staff for the newly merged district. And, combining the resources and the efficiencies, and looking at this from a long-term perspective, it's going to ensure that we have the resources that we need to continue and enhance educational programs. And as I mentioned, 10 years of building aid at 98%. We should really, this is an opportunity for us to address any long-term facility needs that we might have. Unifying the middle school and high school programs, could result in some space for new opportunities. Several districts in the region, will rent out district-based classrooms for BOCES. Other districts have community health centers. And so it really offers an opportunity to, enhance the space that we already have within the two districts. Now to dive in a little bit deeper, and I'm going to have to look at the slide a little bit. You can see that deposits budget is about, and this is 25, 26 numbers, because when we began the study, budgets for 26, 27 were not finalized at that point. Deposits budget's about 19.5 million, and Hancock's budget's about 13.5 million. But from a revenue perspective, you can see that the percentages of state aid and taxes are, there's a little disparity in there. And we're going to go over that in the next slide. Deposits, school taxes represent about 48% of the budget, as opposed to Hancock's at 33%. State aid, again, the largest portion of either revenue sources, 43% for deposit and 58% for Hancock. The remainder of the revenues, use of reserves, other, fund balance that might balance the budgets, and other revenues are pretty consistent percentage-wise between the districts. Well, when we look at foundation aid, which is the primary source of state aid that is provided to the school districts, we can see that the two amounts are fairly equal. 5.8 million in deposit, 5.4 million in Hancock, and there's a reason for this. We are in, foundation aid was fully funded in a couple of years ago, 23, 24, but there were still districts that were held harmless or saved harmless. There's a couple of different ways of terming it, but basically the New York State, the legislators and executive proposals include the same amount of aid as was received in the prior year, and often there's a percentage of 1 or 2% that's added on top of that. So even though if we ran the state aid numbers right now, there would be a decrease in that chart in the bottom right-hand corner of about $800,000 for deposit and 2.7 million for Hancock. That is what the state is kicking in to make us whole. For 26, 27, there was an additional 2% added, but 2% of 5.8 million and 2% of 5.4 million is not a significant amount of revenue that the district is receiving. So we are seeing pretty stagnant growth of revenue from a state aid perspective. The reason I mention this is because if Save Harmless went away, the Hancock School District would be more negatively impacted than the Deposit School District. So this tells me that the enrollment, the student needs measures, and all the other factors that go into the state aid formulas, especially for foundation aid, are not generating as many dollars in Hancock. So the reason there's a disparity between the amount of state aid, the percentage of state aid, is because Hancock is receiving, more on this Save Harmless calculation. From an expenditure perspective, we are certainly a people business. That's what education is. And so it's not surprising that the two largest pieces in this breakdown represent staffing and the benefits associated with with that staffing. It's 61% in Hancock, 66% in deposit. And many of the other variables that you see, or the other pieces of the pie here, are not significantly different. I broke out BOCES, not because we invited the district superintendents from each BOCES here, but because that is another method that the districts have been collaborating and sharing services with other districts in the region. And so it represents a large percentage of the expenditure budget, and not uncommon for smaller school districts, because we, as was pointed out in the organizational capacity part, we might not have as many students as we need to be able to run something in-house. And so that's something that a newly merged district would evaluate, and those efficiencies, might be able to be taken advantage of. So, from a financial perspective, and all of the numbers, and I try not to talk a lot in numbers, most people end up standing up and leaving, but the biggest point is the amount of reorganization incentive operating aid. It's projected to be $41.7 million, but that will reset based on 26-27 numbers. And I've looked at those. It's going to be slightly higher, probably. If we move this forward a year, as we would do on the timeline that was presented. So that's significant dollars that the districts would see, and they would be doing some of the same things that they have already been doing outside of formal reorganization. In addition to that $41.7 million, there would be an additional $3.6 million of that enhanced building aid, because the state funds building aid at the highest of the two building aid ratios. And so that would also generate additional dollars from that perspective. I can turn for you.
Did you go all the way back?
What's that? I can turn for you.
No, it's okay. I just got to make sure we're at the right one. Okay. All right. So, we have, thank you to Jeff and Kathy for outlining the educational experiences.
Nope, you're right.
Where are we? Oh, here we
Okay,
go.
There we go.
So, just to recap, our process has been over the last several months. We do engage as many people as possible. We did have our first thought exchange in February of this year, our second one in April. We worked with our stakeholder groups throughout February and March of this year to elevating student voices. And we really feel as if that hearing from students directly just adds to the whole product. And that's why we really lean into the students. And we met with our focus groups in the months of February as well. This is, these are like what came out of those experiences. You can read it for yourself. You'll certainly see it on page 17. You may have noticed at the bottom of each slide is the report page that you can go to talk, to read more about what these slides are highlighting. But, there are certain staffing challenges, and students have said, there hasn't been a teacher here for this fill in the blank for a third year in a row. That's just something that came out of those conversations. Every one of these quotes that you see on the screen were from conversations we had with stakeholders, and in this case, our students, right? If we merged, there would be more fill-in-the-blank classes that are offered now. So again, you can see and read more in the report on page 17 what the students had to say and how they were involved in this process. This is what if. Like, what if you did decide to reorganize? We put this into the project for you to think about. Certainly, we feel as if that if you consolidate and decide to move forward, that's your decision whatsoever. But there are a number of components that you could really, the sky's the limit, is how we say it. So, you know, more competency-based and mastery learning, you know, a strengthening of the school and community, leveraging technology for all students for equity, and then finding ways to better address the mental health and issues that not exist, of course, across the state and the nation, but are so much harder to access in rural communities. Our assessment of this project is that there would be enhanced educational opportunities for students. You would be able to optimize organizational capacity, and there would be greater long-term financial stability if you move forward. But that's not for us to decide. At the end of the day, it's up to you. As I said at the beginning of this presentation, this is your community, these are your kids, and they're your tax dollars, and this decision is yours to make. We encourage you to dig into this document, regardless of what your boards of education decide to do. They may decide to move forward and say, yes, we want the voters to decide whether or not we're going to move forward. If that happens, dig into this document. 167 pages of what is and what could be. If they decide not to move forward, dig inside that document of what is and what could be. The worst thing that could happen is for us to have spent months here, and as a result of us being here, nothing happens. Right? That something doesn't have to be a reorganization, but something has to come out of our time together. And there is information in that study, whether or not you move forward, to help you enhance the educational program. Here's another thing I will say. If you do decide, if the boards do decide to go forward, read the document, because people are going to draw conclusions and people are going to make statements that may or may not be accurate. And you should be able to say, that's not what it says on page 142. Go back to the document. When people say things, when people make comments, when people assert that something is true or something isn't true, go back to the document and use the document as a map forward, whether or not you decide to make this decision. Good night. Yes, sir. Oh, and you know what we're going to ask? We're going to ask whoever has a question, come on up and come to the microphone so everyone can hear you. Yeah. And we'll do one of us will answer your question to the best of our ability.
Sam Rowe, Hancock School District. Can you scroll back to the roadmap? That little timeline thing? Yeah, it was like 3 hours ago, I think. I don't know what page.
What was it on ours or was it on? Okay, yeah.
Well, look at February. it looks like this is an expedited process. That's 4 months worth of work done in 1 month. That's a lot of data collection. That's a lot of statistical processing. That's a lot of information to take in. For something so important, I don't understand why that had to be compressed. And then as you go through the process, I did attend 2 meetings. The second one I attended in deposit with Scott, me and another member from Hancock. We got a paper. We got to read what was in the paper. We were allowed 10 minutes, and then we could announce any questions that we had. And then we had to hand the paper back when it was all over. So this whole thing looks like the final report should be 8 months. You've really packed an 8-month process into 4 months because June doesn't count and things were probably done this is probably a 4-month thing that this was squeezed into. The people, the community have tried to have meetings. We've never seen anything in writing. We're all educators. You're all educators. I'm not. You all remember the game in kindergarten when you whisper something in the kid's ear next to you, it goes around in a circle and comes back. That's what we've been trying to base our decision on and fact find by ourselves and present questions. This might be a good thing. It might not. I applaud the Board of Education for having the courage to make the initiative. But I'm saying we need 8 months. And the people that are making decisions and have to get in the voter booth and vote, we want our time to see that study and digest it ourselves. I don't want to hear from you. I like you. You're all nice people. I didn't retain anything you said. That's just not cool. People can't hear well. People can't see well. They need a better avenue to digest this information. This is too fast. This is too important. I wouldn't rush stuff a quarter of as important as this, the way this has been. And I've been involved in some pretty big decisions at the county level. $23 million jail, $23 million composting facility, consultants, timeline, step-by-step siting survey, all these things. Each thing had a target date. The target date was followed. Month 2, month 3, month 5, and month 4 should have been a 4-month process. I think you're 3 months fast, and I hope I speak for some people from Hancock and say, we want that 3 months so we can look at what you have in writing. Thank you.
You're going to have access to it tonight. It'll be online, and we encourage you to jump right in it. Oh, by the way, yeah, it's already on the joint website now, the report.
So what other questions do we have tonight? You can ask questions about the study. You can ask questions about the process. And then you can have time to digest it. Along with the board, you'll have time to digest it.
I'm a Wayne Highlands parent. I haven't heard Wayne Highlands at all in this process, and I would hate for that to end. It's been decades of sending kids here, and I wouldn't want that to end because it doesn't work because the high school's in deposit, and we just can't get our kids there.
So I did have a conversation with the superintendent from your district who said that if it was at all possible, that he would want to continue this relationship with the new school district. He said that the transportation might be an issue. He also said there were some other issues in that district that could arise that would cause it not to be possible, regardless if they reorganized or not. But that superintendent who we spoke to, and I apologize, I can't remember his name.
Morgan.
Yeah, wonderful guy. But his intention is to continue to have students attend whether the school district's reorganized or not.
Thank you. I just hope we keep the communication going if we go in the next direction.
Could you maybe give the background a little bit about that for
I,
everybody? Background of the fact that they have tuition students?
yeah, I mean, so I think everybody knows
Oh,
that.
I didn't know if everybody.
Yeah, I think everybody does know that for a very, very long time, students from the Wayne Highland School District have been coming. At once they went to both school districts, and now it's only Hancock. But if it did reorganize, it would, that relationship continue. Again, right? So-
Hi, my name is Stacy Saul. I'm a parent here in Hancock. I just wanted to say that I feel like this meeting was completely useless, and I feel like the last 2 hours have been wasted. We got absolutely no new information, so I don't understand how we're supposed to have any questions to address. We basically just sat here and listened to you babble on for 2 hours, and I don't know if you noticed, but several people got up and left, and I was considering doing the same. So I'm just very disappointed. I thought we were gonna actually get information tonight. I wouldn't have come if I had known that we were just gonna sit and listen to this.
We're using our teacher wait time. All right, any other questions before we wrap up the study and the presentations and turn it over to the boards?
Rich Alshu from the Deposit High School. After everyone gets a chance to kind of look at what you've presented, the study, is there any plans for a future meeting where maybe we could all get back together and allow the people in the community to ask questions, excuse me, based on what we've read in the study?
Certainly. Sir, the expectation is that we would present actually to the boards tonight. The boards would make a decision at some point. We would release the study, and then after people had time to digest it and ask questions at a future board meeting, come back and answer those questions.
Would both boards be present at that time?
That's not my decision. That's up to each individual school board to make that decision.
Okay.
I just also wanted to add to that. I think that similarly, some of you attended like a town hall meeting that Lori and I did, one in Hancock, one in Deposit at the local libraries, which was really well attended. Actually, we had at least about 20 people at each meeting with really good conversation. I think that that would be the intent, not only just in a public, like at a board meeting, but also to do some community meetings for people to come to ask the questions after you've had some time to look at the report, and maybe have some more of those, you know, kind of one-to-one conversations.
I do have a multitude of questions, so I'm just wondering if you guys will entertain that via email. I just would like to encourage you to fully digest before trying to or attempting to make a decision tonight. Not feel compressed. This is very important. So I'll be sending my questions to you guys, and I hope you entertain them.
Hi, I'm Michelle Wormuth. I am a bus driver for Hancock Central School. If the merger was to go through, how many bus drivers do you foresee needing? Is that in that study?
No, that is not totally in that study.
I can give you a, Michelle, I can give you a possible answer. I mean, it's like, don't take don't take it for gold, but in looking at some things, there's like a scenario that would possibly, the lowest number we'd need additional drivers would be probably 3 to 4. We'd feel comfortable with 5. It's a challenge, right? Like, and there's possibly retirements coming up in both districts with drivers.
Multiple.
Right. So if you look at that, if people retire around the same time, possibly 8 drivers. So it's an area that transportation, when Kathy said you have to really be careful about how you invest in people and so you don't go bankrupt at the same time, transportation is one area we'd have to really make attractive for drivers.
Last call for questions. So I think we're going to turn it over to the board presidents.
So discussing with the board, we're going to review this and take some time and discuss this merger at a later date. Once we all have a time to go over it and then review it, and then we'll do the same with deposit.
Yeah, and I just want to speak for deposit. Number one, we want to thank you for everything you've done to do this study, give us some insight of what we as a board need to do moving forward, and getting the public involved, the community involved to let us hear their voices. Deposit's going to sit on this a little bit. 167 pages, a little bit to absorb. We want to check out the facts and make sure that, you know, we're doing the right thing moving forward for the students, in my mind, number one, and for our public and for our staff. So we're gonna kind of table this a little bit. One thing I do want to kind of make clear is even if the boards move forward with this, it's not a merge. Is that correct? It comes to a straw vote, and the process continues on from there. So it gives plenty of opportunity, even if the boards were to say, let's move forward, evaluate this program, see what it's going to do for us, and have a lot of time to, in between, evaluate the programs. Am I getting it? Okay. All right. Thanks, Cliff.
Get a motion to adjourn? All in favor? Thank you, everybody.
We got Stacy and Don. All in favor? Aye. No nays? Adjourned.
I just wanted to say to everybody also that I think, so if we take our time, we will make sure it's very public. The date, if the boards decide to move forward to make to discuss the motion of whether or not to have a straw vote, that will be publicized so that people can attend that meeting, so that you know when that happens, just so you know.
What did I do? That was a mic drop and not mine.